A letter has already been written in heaven, with your name on the front, and a promise inside that you have been waiting on for a long time. Not a wish I'm still thinking about. Not a kindness I'm hoping I can afford. Not a maybe held together by your performance. A sealed letter signed in my own hand, kept in a place no thief can reach, and no failure of yours can cancel. Come a little closer. Right now, before this short message ends, I'm going to break the seal in front of you and read you the one sentence I wrote inside it a very long time ago. The sentence that will quiet in this very moment the fear you have not been able to quiet on your own. Stay near. There is no rush in this room. You have been carrying something for a while now. A prayer that has lived in you so long you have started to feel embarrassed about still bringing it up. The same ask, the same ache, the same hopeful sentence whispered into the dark of another morning. And somewhere along the way, a quiet thought began to grow next to that prayer. Maybe he heard me and changed his mind. Maybe the promise was for someone with stronger faith. Maybe I missed the window. Maybe I read the sign wrong. Maybe what felt so clear back then was just my own hope speaking in a borrowed voice. And every time that quiet thought visits, it leaves a little less of you standing. A small erosion of the place inside where your hope used to live easily. I want to tell you that the thought is not the truth. The thought is the residue of every human voice that ever broke an agreement with you. The thought is old water that has nothing to do with what I am actually doing in the underground of your life. But before I tell you what I am doing, hear this. I see exactly where you are sitting in this moment. And I see exactly what it has cost you to keep waiting. I see you. There's a mother praying for a son who walked out of the house years ago and has not come back home. The father waiting on a door to open in his work, in his health, in a relationship he cannot fix on his own. I have been beside him. Somewhere a single one is still believing for a love that was promised in a quiet moment of prayer and has not yet arrived at the table. None of you are hidden from me. Every diagnosis you are waiting to change, every debt you are waiting to lift, every name you are waiting to clear, every child you are waiting on, every season you are waiting to turn, I have been counting with you. The friends stopped asking how the waiting was going because they did not know what to say anymore. Your morning prayer has gotten shorter because saying the same sentence out loud one more time has begun to feel like a kind of grief. I hear every shortened word. I am not annoyed that you are still waiting. I am tender about it. I'm not standing at a distance with crossed arms measuring your patience against some invisible line. I am sitting beside the place you are sitting looking at the same horizon, watching the same sky. And I am the one who knows what is forming in the part of the sky you cannot see yet. I see something else, too. I see the small ways you have tried to protect yourself from this promise in case it never comes. I see the way you have stopped saying it out loud to anyone in case the silence eventually proves the doubters right. I see the way you have begun to lower the volume on your own hope, telling yourself a quieter hope hurts less if it never happens. I see the small ceremonies of resignation you have started practicing. The shrug you give now when someone asks how a certain thing is going, the half smile that hides the still burning ask underneath. I am not embarrassed by any of those small protections. They are the bandages of a person who has been wounded by old broken promises. But I am about to show you something that means you do not have to keep wearing them. You did not come by this doubt all on your own. You learned it the first time someone told you they would be there for you and were not. You learned it the day a person you trusted made a promise out loud and then quietly walked it back when keeping it became inconvenient. You learned it the morning a parent did not call when they said they would, and you sat by the window long enough to understand that promises sometimes evaporate without explanation. You learned it the night a partner told you forever, and then taught you that forever was a smaller word than you had been told. You learned it in places of worship where you were told that my favor would arrive if you gave enough, served enough, performed enough, smiled enough. And you watched other people do all of those things and still bury what they loved. The bruise on the place where promises used to land in your life was not put there by me. But I see the bruise. And I know that every time my word draws near to that place, it touches a wound that is still tender. And your whole body flinches before your mind can even decide what to think. Let me defend you from a voice that has been speaking over you for too long. The voice that says your hope is naive. The voice that says you should have moved on by now, given up on the promise, stopped expecting anything beautiful from a God who has clearly forgotten where he put your file. That voice is not mine. That voice has never been mine. The voice that comes from me does not shame you for the staying. It honors the staying. The staying itself is a kind of altar. And I have been keeping company at that altar with you the entire time. Soften your jaw for one breath. Just the jaw. That small muscle has been clenched around the fear that this promise might not come. Let it down for a moment. Notice how much you have been holding without knowing you were holding it. The hope you have been carrying is not a heavy thing in my hands. It is only heavy in yours because you have been guarding it alone. Hand the guarding back to me for the rest of this short message. I am better at it than you are, and I am not tired. Hear this. What broke you in human promises is not the shape of my promise. They look the same from the outside. Words in the air, a hand on a shoulder, a feeling of certainty. But the inside of my word is built out of something else entirely. A human promise is a hope dressed up in confident clothes. My word is the thing the universe was made out of. They are not the same material. They cannot fail the same way because one of them cannot fail at all. Somewhere along the way, you were taught to think of my promises like a contract that needs your signature renewed every morning. You were taught that if your faith dipped at noon, the contract paused. You were taught that if you doubted on Tuesday, you had to start the waiting clock over on Wednesday. You were taught that the promise was hanging by a thin thread tied to how well you were performing the role of a believer that week. You were taught that my word was a kind of conditional offer valid, while supplies of your goodness lasted withdrawn the moment your goodness ran out. That is not how my word works. That has never been how my word works. That picture of my promises you carry in your chest right now, fragile, conditional, easily withdrawn, dependent on whether you woke up strong today, was painted by hands that were not mine. Some of those hands belonged to people who loved you and were doing their best with a small understanding of who I am. Some belong to people who used the thread of my disappointment as a way to keep you in line. Some belong to teachers who had never been promised anything beautiful themselves and could not imagine that I would be different with you. Either way, the picture is wrong. Set it down for a minute. Let it lean against the wall while I tell you what my word actually is. My word is not a wish. My word is a guarantee. When I speak a thing about your life, the speaking of it is already the doing of it, even when the doing is still hidden from your eyes. That distance you feel between the spoken promise and the seen answer is not a measure of my faithfulness. It is a measure of the room I am preparing for the answer to land in. A farmer who plants a seed in good ground does not have to keep digging it up to check whether it is still planted. That seed is in the ground. That promise is in the air. That doing is happening in a room you cannot see yet. But the room is real and the work is moving. You have been measuring the promise by the surface of your circumstances. That is the wrong instrument. Surfaces tell you almost nothing about what is forming underneath. That bare patch of ground you keep walking past is not empty. It is being prepared. That closed door you keep trying the handle on is not locked because I am angry. It is closed because the room beyond it is still being made ready for you to step into without it crushing you. Place your foot flat on the floor right now and feel it pressing back against you. It is not negotiating with you. It is not deciding whether to support you today based on how strong you woke up feeling. It is just there holding what it was made to hold. That is the shape of what I'm about to read to you. My promise is not a feeling that has to. You be revived every morning. My promise is a floor. You can wake up doubting, fearful, exhausted, half believing, and the floor is still there holding the same weight it held the day before and the day before that and the year before that. A floor does not move because your faith moved. It does not tilt because you doubted along the way. It does not retract because you forgot to thank me in a hard hour. It just goes on being a floor. That is what I am asking you to lean on now. Let that begin to settle into the part of you that has been bracing for the ground to give way. I have heard every silent reservation you have been carrying. A thought that maybe the promise was for the version of you who had not yet failed. A thought that maybe you used up your portion when you walked away from me for those few years. A thought that maybe the answer was on its way, and then your behavior in some forgotten season convinced me to redirect it to someone more deserving. None of that is true. Not one of those thoughts has any standing in the room where the promise lives. I do not revoke what I have spoken because you stumbled. I do not move the seal because you grew tired. It was never tied to your ability to be impressive. It was tied to who I am. I'm about to read you a sentence I had written down for you a very long time ago. I did not write it for theologians. I did not write it for the strong. I wrote it for the tired one. The one who has been waiting on a promise so long the waiting itself has started to feel like the whole story. I wrote it for the one who is no longer sure they can survive another disappointment. I wrote it for the one who has stopped speaking the promise out loud because saying it has begun to feel like risking a fresh wound. I wrote it especially for the one who has been brave enough to keep coming back to listen even when the listening felt like nothing was changing. This sentence was carried in a letter to a small group of Hebrew believers in a city far from home. They had said yes to me with their whole hearts in a brave and costly moment, and then the waiting began. Years passed. Some of them had been promised relief from persecution and were still hiding. Some had been promised provision and were still hungry. Some had been promised the safe return of family members who had been taken. And the doors of their houses still stayed empty at sundown. They were sitting together in a small room holding old promises in their hands like papers that were beginning to fade. And the question on every face was the same question on yours. Did he change his mind? Did we hear him wrong? Is the promise still alive? Is the one who spoke it still on the throne, or did the throne shift while we were not looking? They were not bad people. They were tired people. They had built their lives on what I had said to them. And the world around them kept asking them to explain why their God seemed so slow. They had no good answer. They only had a memory of my voice and a stubborn refusal to let go of it. Hear me say it plainly. I love that kind of stubbornness. I have loved it in them, and I love it in you. The refusal to give up on a promise that has not yet arrived is one of the most honest forms of worship there is, and I have been receiving yours. A letter arrived. The letter was read aloud in that small room. And in that letter I gave them, and you sitting where you are right now, a sentence to hold on to for the rest of their lives. A sentence that is still in the same letter, still under the same seal, still being read aloud in small rooms. All over the world in this very hour, including the one you are sitting in. This is what I said. Hebrews chapter 6 verses 17 and 18. When God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath, so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement. Read these words slowly with me. There is more in it than the speed of an ordinary read will let you see. Heirs of the promise, that is you. Not visitors, not applicants, heirs. The promise is already in your name in the book where these things are kept. Unchangeable character. The thing about me that you are leaning on in this hour is not a mood I might be in. It is a character, a settled way of being, and it does not flicker. Two unchangeable things. First is my word, the promise itself, spoken from a mouth that cannot speak a faucet. Second is my oath, a vow I added on top of my word, not because my word needed help, but because I knew you would. I knew you had been lied to. I knew you would need more than one anchor when the storm came. So, I gave you two. I doubled the assurance, not because the promise was weak, but because you were tender. That doubling was a kindness aimed straight at the bruise. And then the sentence I am giving you to carry out of this room. It is impossible for God to lie. Not difficult. Not unlikely. Not improbable. Impossible. There is no version of me in any corner of the universe that says one thing to your face and means another in private. There is no quiet me behind the loud me who is rolling his eyes at your waiting. That me who spoke the promise over your life is the only me there is. And that me cannot lie any more than fire can be cold. What you are afraid of that I might have said it and not meant, it is not a possibility. It is not a small possibility. It is not a 1 in a million possibility. It is not a possibility at all. The oath you are waiting on was sworn in my son's blood. It was sealed in the empty tomb. It was signed with a signature that cannot be forged and cannot be revoked. A seal on a letter that has your name on it does not weaken when your faith weakens. It does not crack when your patience cracks. It does not lose its grip when your grip loses. This promise is not being held up by you. It is being held up by me. You are not the foundation under it. I am, and I have never collapsed. I'm not going to begin collapsing now under the weight of one tired believer, who is still here, still listening, still hoping. Strong encouragement. That is the phrase the letter uses for what you are meant to feel right now. Not a small comfort, not a faint flicker. Strong encouragement. The kind that can hold up a whole life. The two unchangeable things were given to you for exactly this hour. For the night when the calendar feels too long. For the morning when you cannot find another way to say the prayer. For the afternoon when the doubt sits down next to you uninvited. In that hour you are meant to remember that two unchangeable things stand between you and the abyss your fear keeps inviting you to fall into. My word. My oath. Neither one of them is going anywhere. and the letter calls you a refugee in that same line. One who has fled for refuge. That image was not chosen by accident. A refugee is someone who ran out of options and ran toward the one place left where their life would be held. That is what you have done. Even on the days you felt nothing while you were doing it. Every morning you came back to me with the same ask. Every night you whispered the same hope into the dark. Every quiet moment you said in your heart that you had nowhere else to go. Those were not signs of weak faith. Those were the steps of a person fleeing into the only safe room there is. And the door of that room is my word sealed with my oath. And it does not slam shut on the one who runs to it. Look at the question I asked at the start of this message. Why does my word keep feeling like it might slip through my fingers? Here is the answer. Because somewhere along the way you started believing the promise was hanging on your performance. It is not. It never was. It is hanging on the unchangeable character of the one who spoke it. And that one is impossible to move. Your performance was never the load-bearing wall. A load-bearing wall is me, and I am not having a weak day. I have never had a weak day. I am the steadiness underneath every season your life will ever pass through, and I am the steadiness underneath the season you are in right now. Let that one sentence sink past the place where the bruise lives, slowly, with me. It cannot fail. It cannot bend. That includes the word he spoke over your life today, right now, while you are still waiting. This waiting does not contradict the promise. This waiting is the room where the promise is being finished. Open both hands in your lap, palms facing up, like someone receiving a letter from a friend instead of a bill from a stranger. That is the posture the promise is asking from you. Not a clenched fist of demand. Not a closed fist of fear. An open hand. A letter has already been written. A seal has already been pressed. Delivery is being handled by someone who has never lost a single one. You do not have to chase the courier down the road. You do not have to invent the address. An address is already on the envelope, and the envelope is already on the way. So, here is something small you can carry into the rest of your week. Next time the doubt arrives, and it will, because doubt has been your roommate for years, and roommates do not move out quickly, you do not have to argue with it. You do not have to defend yourself. You do not have to summon a feeling of faith you do not have. You only have to ask the doubt one question. Can this promise fail? If the answer is yes, the voice is yours. Return it gently to the one who brought it. If the answer is no, the voice is mine. Keep that one. Carry it through the rest of the afternoon and into the night and let it speak louder than the older voices the day will try to hand you. There's a second part to this small practice and it matters. When you ask the question and the answer comes back no, do not move on too quickly. Stay in the no for a moment. Let the no settle. The no is not just a logical conclusion. The no is the sound of two unchangeable things resting under your situation, holding it up while you breathe. The longer you let yourself sit in that no, the more the floor under your hope will begin to feel like a floor again instead of a question. And one more thing, on the days the doubt comes so loud that you cannot even hear the question, and there will be days like that, do not panic. Do not measure your faith by the volume of the noise around it. Simply place your hand on the seal you cannot see and say one word out loud, guaranteed. That single word is a whole sentence to me. It means I remember what you said. I am not abandoning the promise. I am still standing in the field where you pay.